Hey folks, this is going to be a big one here today, and I need your help with a little bit of an experiment. We think we have an idea of what's going on with the traffic feed on YouTube. I need you to interact with the video. Leave a comment with a couple words in it, emojis, all that sort of stuff, and right now, like the video. If you appreciate or you think that you're going to appreciate the content of this video, hit the like button right now. Right? It has to do with how it counts views and interaction, all that sort of stuff. It will absolutely help this channel grow and spread the message to more people. Let's get into it. As a Second Amendment related channel, one of the pillars of everything that we do here today is the Constitution. And one of the supporting pieces of framework of the Constitution that is exceptionally important is the Bill of Rights. What comes before the Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights is the First Amendment. And you could argue which of those is more important, the right to speak your mind or the right to defend your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Which is the chicken and which is the egg? That's a discussion for another day. But there's a lot of conjecture online right now that the First Amendment in this country is under attack, that it is being marginalized. And to answer the question, is the First Amendment under attack in the United States of America? I would say absolutely yes, but not in the way that many people are thinking about in the current news. Well, there's a lot of things that are out there making big headlines right now, like people losing their jobs over saying stupid crap on the internet, to people's shows getting canceled because they've decided to go on air and blatantly misrepresent the facts of a national tragedy for the purposes of personal enrichment and advancing a political ideology. Those are only things that are really eclipsing the underlying issues that are eventually, if allowed to run unchecked, will result in the loss of most of the freedom in the United States. And I think there are plenty of examples today of things that are and are not, pause for effect, instances of infringement on the First Amendment rights of American citizens. And I wanted to dig into some of those here today. Today's video is brought to you by Medical Gear Outfitters. They are my one-stop shop for all things medical. I've known the folks that run that company for over a decade now. They're great folks, and their big thing is not only supplying all the individual items that you should have in a trauma kit, but also having themed trauma kits available for all of your needs, whether it's a car accident that you're concerned about, whether it's just a general first aid kit for bumps and bruises, or if it is a blowout kit for your tactical rig or something. Check them out at Medical Gear Outfitters, and we have a discount code there that you can use to great effect to get yourself squared away. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. This is the text of the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, and we'll flesh this out a little bit more, but you will notice that it provides a stop against the government. It provides a hard limitation against the power of the federal government. In fact, the entire Constitution is a limiting document on the power of the federal government. The federal government's responsibilities and powers are expressly outlined in the enumerated powers. Everything else not expressly outlined in the enumerated powers is reserved to the states and to the people. The text of the 14th Amendment is pretty long. We're not going to read the whole thing out here, but the paraphrase is that this is where equal protection under law comes from. Just because Congress is listed as the operative on the fundamental rights in the Bill of Rights doesn't mean that the rights stop there, and the government has a duty to protect you and your rights from itself, other governments in the United States, and other people. That should complete our review of 5th grade civics class, but to wrap that all up with a nice bow, you have rights. The government cannot infringe those rights, whether we're talking about the federal government, the state government, your local government, and those governments have a duty to protect your rights from each other and other citizens. However, citizens also have their own rights, and your rights do not supersede those rights when those two come into conflict. And it is a continuum of life, liberty, in pursuit of property. So if your pursuit of property inhibits somebody's right to life, well, they win. Said another way, in the context that we are discussing here today, you cannot be stopped from speaking by the federal government, by the state government, by your local government, by other citizens. They cannot physically force you to stop speaking. However, that does not insulate you from the consequences of them using their rights to free speech back against you. Which brings me up to our first question. Can you be fired from your work for saying heinous shit on the internet that your employer does not agree with? Well, let's walk that back just a little bit. And first, remember that if you are employed, privately employed, you're either employed by a individual citizen or some kind of corporation, and corporations have the right to free speech as well. Now, there's a different set of circumstances if you are employed by the government that I'm not really going to get into here today. If you're employed by the government, there's a completely different set of rules because that is the government curtailing your right to free speech. So there are certain parameters there, and the employment at will then versus unionized and all that sort of stuff that we're not going to get in here today. But we're going to assume that the vast majority of people are either employed by an individual citizen or a corporation, both of which have First Amendment rights. So what can that employer absolutely not do? They cannot force you from speaking. They cannot lock you in the building to keep you from going out and disseminating your opinions. However, if you say something that is adverse to that company's free speech or their mission or tarnishes their brand, well, they do not have an obligation to continue to pay you. They can terminate your employment for that sort of thing. In most instances, you are an employee at will, and they can really fire you for whatever they want, especially if they have some kind of hate that is coming their way based on some of the actions that you have taken. You have a fiduciary duty to your employer, and if you breach that fiduciary duty, they can fire your ass. Does that mean that your employer is somehow 100% insulated against some kind of wrongful termination suit that alleges that they did infringe on your First Amendment rights by terminating your employment? No, absolutely not. But that's an interest balancing thing, and that's where the courts come in, and the judiciary has an entirely different set of rules that it plays by. The Jimmy Kimmel losing his show situation. This one is a giant clusterfuck, and it's considerably more complicated than was initially reported, but you all know how this works. The headline sticks in people's mind considerably longer than any factual information that comes out after the fact, and most people never even hear of that sort of stuff anyway because they're just normie pricks that don't really pay all that much attention to what's actually going on in the environment around them. So to quickly paraphrase what happened, Jimmy Kimmel went on his late-night television program and misrepresented some facts of the Charlie Kirk political assassination. From that incident, he was asked if he would like to go on air and apologize for misrepresenting these facts and mischaracterizing the political affiliation and impetus for his murder. Especially when you're on the cutting edge of news, which this definitely was not, sometimes information can get muddled and erroneous information is put out. And anyone like ABC, Fox News, CNN, etc., is held to a higher standard while using the public airwaves regulated by the FCC as an authoritative source. And those regulations include that they must serve the public interest by providing factually accurate information. Oftentimes, this comes out in the form of a news story is posted, and then that is edited with a disclaimer that says, we actually got this wrong initially, or bad, or some kind of retraction happens after the fact. Jimmy Kimmel was asked if he would like to submit a retraction or apologize, and he flat out refused. Late night host Jimmy Kimmel said he was unwilling to apologize for his remarks and blamed MAGA supporters for killing conservative activist Charlie Kirk. That's from the New York Post. Ultra-conservative conspiracy. And this is where the plot thickens a little bit. We're not sure which happened first or what the order of events were, but officially the FCC, and we discussed the implications of the FCC just a couple seconds ago, the FCC is not officially involved in this situation. However, we do know that there were some comments made by the FCC chairman about the incident. But what did ultimately end up happening is ABC pulled the show, and the affiliates that were involved with broadcasting the show and spreading it around to the various stations also said that they're not going to carry the show. Think Disney and all those folks, right? If we look at the broader tapestry in the background, however, we have a huge Nexstar merger that's going on that, I mean, we're talking billions and billions of dollars riding on this huge merger that already has some antitrust considerations that might keep it from happening. But a big controversy like this going on at the same time also is not great for the optics of that merger. So with billions on the line for that merger, this happens at, and this is 100% opinion on my part, this happens at the perfect time for them to get rid of a financial liability. Because let's be real, we know that this show is losing tens of millions of dollars a year. It was already a liability as far as like a business-to-business decision for that merger. And on top of it, we've got a nasty controversy going on. And this is an opportunity for somebody like ABC to pull the ripcord, basically, and say, yeah, this guy's, we're done, right? This is no longer part of our portfolio. And that just comfortably cleans up a prospective problem down the road. Let's play devil's advocate here for a moment and say that none of that stuff exists, and we'll just go with the popular notion that the FCC chairman through back channels went to ABC and said, you either pull that show, Jimmy Kimmel gets fired, or we're going to pull your license. ABC, the corporation, does have a First Amendment right and rights to free speech. They have also given up a portion of that privilege, of that right, for the privilege of using the public airwaves that are maintained by tax dollars. It's similar to, like, for instance, as a federal firearms license holder, while I am at this premises, which is the premises that holds the federal firearms license, technically the ATF can show up and inspect this place without any notice, without a warrant or any of that sort of stuff. So technically, my Fourth Amendment right to illegal search and seizure is curtailed to a degree for the privilege of being able to operate as a business in the firearms space, because I'm under the regulation of the Department of Justice. You see how that works? So I've given up a portion of my rights for extraordinary privileges. Those privileges can be rolled back and revoked if I don't follow the rules. Very similar to what's going on with the Jimmy Kimmel show and ABC. Let's say, again, that is absolutely what happened. The FCC comes in and says, pull that show or your license is revoked. And technically, that's all legal. And revert to the previous discussion about whether your employer can fire you or not for stuff that makes them look bad.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle. There's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
That is the Attorney General of the United States. She is supposed to be the top lawyer in the United States of America. That woman should be fired from her job immediately. And I've said this time and time again, she is the worst appointment that Donald Trump has ever made in either of his terms. This woman is demonstrably unqualified and just outside the realm of principle when it comes to really most shit. But this is a fine example of someone who has gotten the levers of power that should be nowhere near them. Hate speech is not codified in our laws, and for good reason, because it is protected speech. You may not like it, just like I don't like a lot of the things that many people in this country said about the death of Charlie Kirk. That does not mean that the government should be able to pursue them with criminal penalties just because we don't like what they say. We can hate their speech, but they are outside the reach of government when it comes to criminal penalties. Remember, we talked about the whole, you're allowed to fuck around. You cannot be prevented from speaking, but the consequences of that fucking around, as in where you find out, is outside the purview of government. That is for the rest of society to punish. Not with violence or anything like that. There are consequences for behaving particular ways, and not all of those consequences are levied by government. Pam Bondi is a statist airhead that has no business near the levers of power. I would like to add that she was clearly also not familiar with the work of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk on multiple occasions had spoken against, railed against the concept of hate speech and how it was antithetical to everything that America stands for. If you want to talk about a threat to freedom in America, that right there. The President of the United States, as Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces, has the power to designate organizations around the world, both foreign and domestic, terrorist organizations, and that opens those organizations up to interdiction by various assets within the military-industrial complex of the United States of America. And in order to achieve that status, they have to rise to the level of having performed some kind of action against American citizens or U.S. infrastructure. And Antifa, even though it's a decentralized, multiple chapter organization in the United States, has clearly risen to that level of destroying massive infrastructure and resulting in death and property damage across the United States for many years. And a key point of that is that they have done so on ideological grounds to intimidate people of a different political persuasion. That's a terrorist organization. Now, being that it is a domestic organization, that means that there are certain kinetic factors that are off the table. The Marine Corps can't start kicking in doors and dragging soy boys out of their mommy's basements. Like, they can't be doing that. However, because of the due process protections of those American citizens, they will have to first be subject to an investigation by assets like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and that also brings to bear assets like the National Security Administration, so enhanced levels of surveillance are at the disposal of the FBI when we're talking about domestic terrorist organizations. That doesn't mean that their rights can be violated. Unless your name is Barack Obama, then American citizens are due their due process. And unless there's some kind of kinetic action that is undertaken by the part of the folks that are the focus of the investigation, well, that legal process must proceed. What that means ultimately is that the funds of Antifa are frozen. They are unable to operate, and every single person that had anything to do with funding that organization can be audited and track that all the way down to figuring out what the underlying purpose of those donations was. Were those funds to be used to paint up funny-smelling people that don't have jobs and nothing better else to do so they can go out and agitate in public, or was it to burn down buildings? Anyway, back to that 14th Amendment, equal protection under law, both for the folks that are under investigation and for the people that were potentially the target of their terrorism. Which, in closing, brings me up to a future hearing that is happening in early October where the CEOs of like Twitch and Steam and all those folks are being brought into the House of Representatives and asked to testify about the online extremism that they help perpetuate. This is very dangerous, and you should all be paying attention to this sort of thing, because I have said for years that these social networking platforms have been playing a very dangerous game. I am very much in the camp of the internet should remain free. There's a reason why the internet should remain free and separated from stuff like the broadcast media regulations in the FCC. I think that there's a clear delineation between these folks that ask for those extraordinary privileges and a medium that is used by the vast majority of humans on the planet to communicate. I think there's a clear distinction there. However, these social networking platforms have been playing a dangerous game for years now. Section 230. Are you a publisher or are you a public forum? They've been riding the fence between the two. If you curate the content on your platform, then you are a publisher and you can be held liable for the stuff that is published on your platform. If you do not curate the content, if you do not play any funny games with that sort of stuff, and you are kind of a hands-off, laissez-faire individual or corporation, then you can't be held liable for it. They've been doing both. I personally would like to see these platforms be treated as public forums, but they need to act accordingly. And this whole crazy community guidelines thing that they've got, they do not want to be treated like a publisher because they will have problems down the road, massive lawsuits. It will end websites like YouTube, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. It will end all of them because they will be sued into oblivion. But they keep playing those stupid games. So I, again, beseech these social networking platforms, act accordingly, act like a public forum, destroy all of the references to any kind of community guidelines whatsoever, and they should just read one thing on your community guidelines page. Don't do illegal shit. We'll see what happens with that, but this is exceptionally dangerous. I personally have major problems with some of the things that have been espoused online by some of the people that they will likely be talking about in that hearing. Do I think that they have done anything that rises to the level of the government going after them with criminal penalties? No, I do not. Do I think that they have violated the terms of service of their social networking platforms? Yes, I do. And if I am held to that standard, then they should be held to that standard. That doesn't mean that they should be immediately deplatformed, but I also think that there should be a reckoning on how those social networking platforms are treating free speech. Because again, they're playing with fire and they're going to get burned. I want to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thank you for tuning in. And hopefully we'll see another video here at the VSO Gun channel.